Alright, so at this phase, now we have all of the silhouettes. I'm just going to go ahead and copy it into a group. And the other ones, I'm just going to go ahead and collapse them so that we have them all separate, just in case I want to just have them for another time. But in this next step, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back to my reference here. I'm going to open up the reference library of textures that I have. I'm going to go ahead and just shrink this one down because I don't think it needs to be that big. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of crop out elements here just to kind of individualize them for different areas and different needs. That should be good. Okay, I'm going to do that here. And I'm going to have the references actually float right above this thing. So let's go ahead and just select these all. And I'm going to right click. And if you guys have CS5, and I believe I'm running on CS6, but they should have this option of being able to color code your layers. So I like to usually color code them red, just so that visually I know exactly what layers all my textures are on. I'm going to go ahead and open up the Buddha reference. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to just kind of pick out just some of these areas here. And remember, this is purely for texture. Texture and minor details. And since I'm doing kind of like a Buddha sci-fi temple, these are the parts that are going to be the most relevant. This one I'm probably going to use as is. Same with this one here. I'll probably just erase away any of the corners that I don't need here. Okay, I'll do that. And this one here. This last one. And there's so many interesting textures here that, you know, once we get it into our silhouette, it's going to make a world of difference. So once we have our reference here, you can see it right here. I'm going to turn off my silhouette layer for just a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually desaturate these, because since we're still at our thumbnail phase and this exercise is purely about exploration, I want to make sure that in this phase of designing, I don't want to be too bogged down by color. Not yet. Color will come later. But in thumbnail phase, it's all about the design. So whatever I design, it's just going to be about the visuals, the aesthetics, the language, the initial textures, and that's it. So that way I can just purely focus on making this thing look as good as possible. So I'm going to have these Buddha textures on another color layer here. Go ahead and turn back on my my silhouettes. I'm going to start off with just one of the textures here. Let's go ahead and start with this guy. So I'm going to duplicate him, and I'm actually just going to pop this in to the silhouette. And the way I'm going to pop it into the silhouette is basically I'm going to press Alt, and I'm going to go right in between the two layers, and it's going to merge it in just like that. And I'm just going to do this kind of freely. I'm just going to go around and not really think about it too much. And obviously going to use different parts of this Buddha texture. I'm just going to go ahead and see if I can just place it in areas. I'm not going to really think too much about, you know, the actual how it's all going to come together, because at this phase it's just all about making it look cool. Right? And even at this phase, you guys are thinking, well, how the hell am I going to make this look cool? This is so weird, right? Don't worry, I'm thinking the same exact thing. But what this does, it kind of gives us a really interesting kind of point of view to start with. And whether that point of view, whether we agree with that point of view or not, it's something worth exploring. It's something worth, you know, trying out before completely shutting it down. So not to preach or anything, but you know, I definitely embrace this way of working just because of the happy accidents and kind of the results that, you know, I've been able to generate from it. So there's something to this, if it's done right and if you follow through. So that's the goal here. That's what I'm trying to get at. And once I have this here, I'm actually going to keep this out. Even this one here. I'm going to go ahead and start plugging in some of the sci-fi printer bits. And notice as I'm plugging them in, I'm obviously trying to fill the black space and duplicate them. And I'm just trying to get textures. And now at this point, if you guys feel like you want to orchestrate or kind of control where the textures fall, you may do so. But right now, for me, it's just to get something in, because I know for a fact that I can always adjust, you know, the textures and how they actually sit on top of the images. So for me, just like what Craig Mullins would say during his painting, you know, try to fill all the white of the canvas, right? So just like in painting terms, I want to just try to eliminate any white in this instance, just so that I can get a better grasp or an idea on what it is that I'm trying to do here. So I don't get too bogged down by the overall, you know, structure of it just yet. I just want cool shapes, cool things going on, and then I'll worry about the rest. Okay. I'll probably even do an overlap here. And sometimes some of these, if the whole Buddha thing doesn't work out, that's fine. You know, I don't have to stay married to this thing. You know, it's just a concept, and it's something that I'm just trying out just for kicks. You know, if something doesn't feel right, if this Buddha texture doesn't seem to work, it's okay to kind of completely overlap it, and we can refine this later on. We can basically make this work later on. That's basically what I'm trying to say. But at this point, it's all about just generating really cool ideas, get something in here, and then see just some cool potential design opportunities. It's weird, like this exercise always reminded me of when I was in college and I was taking kind of these really cheesy graphic design courses, and our instructor would have us cut out random shapes using just a simple pair of scissors, and we had to cut out, you know, triangles, circles, and different color swatches, and it just felt like so elementary, and I didn't really understand. I never really understood the purpose of that exercise until it hit me towards the end of the semester, and even then I was kind of like, what in the hell is going on? Like, why are we cutting out these shapes? What does this have to do with becoming a great artist? And what it taught me, which I found very invaluable later on, was it taught me to understand, you know, composition, shape, contrast in the form of just pure colors and shapes. And so this exercise is basically that, you know, in a nutshell, because we're not painting, we're just thinking about shapes, contrast, comparisons, and not to get too overly technical with you guys, but you know, it's just to make something look interesting without having to be completely defined by something, you know, without having to be an actual object. And it's just to make something look interesting purely through, you know, an arrangement, right? And when I thought about that, I was like, oh man, that's a really interesting way of looking at design. And I started to appreciate, you know, people that arrange flowers, you know, and that's kind of what composition really felt like. It was kind of like someone that can arrange flowers really well, right? And it's kind of like, well, why the hell would I want to arrange flowers? But as an artist, as a designer, if our goal is about putting things together to make it believable or to make it look interesting, we're dealing with a lot of components, right? We're dealing with, you know, organic elements, we're dealing with landscapes, architecture, and if you think about the big picture, it's like a big you know, vase of flowers, or it's like a big pot of ingredients that we're just trying to make work, or make it harmonize in a way. And so that's what this reminds me of, and that's what I literally felt like I learned from that one lesson in my design class. And so it's funny, it just brings me back to those memories of all the times that I would dread going to class. It's like, oh man, I don't want to take that useless class, and it always ends up like that. Like, it becomes so useful after the fact, right? I feel like life works in such a weird way that way. It's like I wish classes felt like classes like that. I wish they were more apparent and more useful to me then, because then I feel like I would have actually paid attention, you know. But to find out after the fact, I'm like, oh man, where are all my notes? It's like I never took none. Awesome. So anyways, what you see here is a big collage, or a big funky mess here, and it's interesting because we have a combination of what looks like computer parts and basically Buddha heads, right? Now remember, we have this refinery, this oil rig. I'm going to use this to start indicating or implementing scale, since these are large architectural buildings or structures. I want to use something that's coexisting, like this oil rig, to give me some sense of scale, and just something that I can showcase as small relatable shapes that will make our eye look at this in a completely different context. Obviously, the ultimate context would be to put it in an environment, but since we're doing these little environmental you know, architectural studies, I'm gonna have to use this as my main tool. So this is gonna be the main tool to kind of make this all work. So I'm gonna go ahead and use elements of this just to simplify and just to give this stuff scale, because, you know, not the printer stuff won't always work, but it works in some instances. So, you know, as many of you guys may know, design is all about editing, and that's one of the biggest things about being a concept artist. We have to be able to tell the viewer what to look at and what to value and what to take from the image. So it's always going to be this balancing act. Do that. Okay, cool. Now what I'm going to do here is, at this point, I feel pretty good about just being able to fill in all the blanks here. You know, I'm sure you guys are kind of scratching your head like, what in the world are we looking at, right? But I'm glad that I was able to fill in the blanks in a way that I can start to really think about detail and how to really refine this guy. Right, so I'm just gonna go ahead and just fill in just a couple more blanks here, just with texture. I just want to make sure that all of this is all good to go. I'm gonna copy this again, and I'm gonna put it in a group so that we have a saved layer here, and I'm actually going to compress all of this. So I have a saved group here if I need to ever go back, but I have a compressed version of this. So now, what I'm going to do here, as an example, is I'm going to go ahead and take one of these guys, and I'm going to start actually painting on it, and painting it to actually start simplifying and adjusting any areas to make more sense of this. Now, am I working within the value? Yes, I'm working within the colors or the values that I've established by turning everything black and white, but I'm also just thinking about the design not being lit just yet. I'm going to light it pretty soon. As a matter of fact, we can start to think about lighting it right now to help with the design process, but I just want to make any edits to help clarify just some of the shapes and stuff like that. So what I can do here is we can lock the transparency, and just to kind of get things going, I'm going to lock the transparency here using this little checkerboard. It's going to lock it for us. And there's two ways about going about lighting here. One, we don't want to make the brush that big. I want to make it smaller. There we go. I can create a layer and lock it in, and I can go ahead and actually paint in shadows. The reason why I'm painting in shadows is that I'm going about it in a way that is indicating that light direction is coming from the top. And with these types of thumbnails, or this particular exercise, that is going to be the goal. I'm going to say that the light is coming from the top, and that is what I'm going to use as my reference point to be able to light and sculpt all of the shapes here. So if this is all in shadow, I'm going to say this is in shadow, and the light is here, and I can effectively go and start painting this structure that has this Buddha looking thing to kind of give it a little bit more cohesiveness and understanding of form. And even though it's 2D, it still gives me the ability to give it just a little bit of dimension so we can understand the object. So that's what I'm doing here. And you can do this all in a regular layer. And notice how I'm painting into the Buddha structure. And I'm just thinking about, this is where now we're internally designing, because we already designed all the silhouettes here. And I'm just literally thinking about, okay, how do I design and make all this stuff look good? Well, since the silhouette's already designed, I'm now just thinking about the internal shapes. Thinking about, you know, how does this all fit into the context? This weird Buddha structure and this sci-fi building, right? And this is where, as a concept designer, we get to justify and make that actually happen, make that work for us. So I'm going to try to figure out what we can do to make that more believable, or make it work in this theme, because obviously this doesn't exist. I'm trying to see how much of that we can actually pull off. So I'm thinking about like just some structures up here. Maybe it's like this sci-fi building that like literally took over. It took over this element here, and it literally now uses it as like, you know, at one point this was an actual architectural, you know, element or ruin that is now protected, and it's now a part of this just this sci-fi structure that was literally built around it. And you just kind of get a remnants of like just the structure and the shapes. So I'm adding in pipes and stuff like that. If you need to, You can pull back. And these exercises are great when you guys are just doing just architectural studies, you know, before getting into a painting. It's so helpful to do these to kind of get into the mindset of what kind of architecture or world you're trying to build. So what I'm going to do here is, obviously I'm painting on this one layer. I'm actually going to go ahead and collapse it so that I can just paint directly on it. Now you guys can choose to paint separately. The reason why I'm just painting it directly on it is that I want to just, you know, be able to manage less layers in this, and if there's anything that I need to erase, I can erase directly without having to go back and forth. And so that's kind of my reasoning, or rhyme and reason for doing that. You guys don't have to do that. Don't feel obligated to work this way. I mean, this is a dangerous way, just because when you make a decision, you can't go back on it. So just know that I'm doing this by choice, not because this is an actual working method, but it's just purely by preference. So now we're starting to create this fusion, right? This fusion of Buddha and some like sci-fi looking tech architecture using printers. It's pretty strange combo, but it can work. Totally can work. And I'm just definitely just simplifying areas where I think there's too much detail, right? And when if you guys have any trouble regarding like how to control detail, just think to yourself, you know, areas of rest versus areas of complexity. That's kind of like my general rule of thumb. Unfortunately there's not a perfect formula to always balance that, but I always think of large, medium, small shapes, and areas that have a nice balance of those things generally will make your designs feel very, very, very dynamic and very complementary to one another. So you just want to make sure it has a nice balance of these shapes. So since these are thumbnails, you know, don't kill yourself to try to get these all perfect. They're just supposed to kind of help speed up the design process here. Let's see here. I'm gonna go ahead and give this just a nice simple shadow. And what I mean by that is I'm just gonna go ahead and just knock this down just a little bit in shadow, just to say that there's this top side of this building is catching light. That's all I'm trying to indicate here. And what's weird is, like, you know, how much of this Buddha structure are we going to really keep? I mean, this is purely up to us, right? I mean, we're the designers. So if I want, I can just kind of say, well, it's a remnant of it. You know, it's not entirely preserved. You know, they're going to build around it and do what they need to do to kind of create their own language and their own architecture. Like, why not? This civilization is they're just using whatever they can to build around it, and so this is what is left of it, right? And this is what's great about thumbnailing at this phase, is that you get to really figure out what kind of world you're building, what kind of language of architecture you're really developing here for yourself. Okay. Kind of funky. And you know what's interesting about doing sci-fi structures is that since it's so out there and there's nothing that we can realistically compare it to, you can't go wrong. And that's kind of part of the reasons why I chose this one here, because you do enough research to kind of get you going, but a lot of it's just kind of you make it up on the whim and just kind of make sure that you have some representation of scale and just make it look cool, man. That's it. That's all we need to focus on, is just make it look cool. So now I got this weird artifact. It's so bizarre. Like, I'm even looking at this like thinking, what in the hell am I doing? This is the weirdest thing I've ever designed. But you know what? I'm just gonna go for it, man. Because if there's any advice I can give myself, is I know that I can design things that I'm already comfortable with, right? So this gives me an opportunity to do something that's completely made up, never been done, and if it sucks, it's okay, because you know what? I tried it. If it's cool, then man, that's a great payoff. It's a great payoff for me, you know, because then I have something here that no one's really necessarily done, or at least that's what I'm thinking, and that's what I'm hoping too. But if this works out and this is a cool design, then you know, and you guys like it, and you know, I love to hear what your guys' thoughts are. But if this turns out cool, then I might turn this into you know, make a full-blown environment out of this or something. Might encourage me to continue this and keep going. Okay. Pretty weird, man. I gotta admit, it's kind of the weirdest thing I've ever did. Okay, so from at this point, I'm probably gonna go ahead and just put a really simple ground plane. And this ground plane is more or less just gonna establish, you know, literally a ground, but it's just so that it doesn't float in the air. And this is something that I learned from my mentor, Scott Robertson. And he always emphasizes putting a ground plane so that our eye can understand the orientation and the general height at which this stands. And if it helps you guys, you know, you can put in a guide for scale. Obviously this is really, really big. So, you know, a person, relative person standing here is going to be about that size. I mean, that's mega big, right? And even then, that might be inaccurate. This is probably looks a lot bigger. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and do this one. Just going to do one more. You guys can see how long these can actually take. So this is definitely not just you know, let's only spend 5 minutes on it. You know, you want to spend good amount of time to make this worthwhile, to make a cool design out of it, you know, and just kind of combine the two ingredients, these elements that we have, and see what we can come up with. And what's cool is that, like, even though this is like some sort of temple, or like, you know, it's a religious icon, that the fact that it's in the context of something sci-fi, it gives me the liberty to kind of go crazy with like how I'm gonna show the forms, how I'm gonna show like all the architecture around it, because it's kind of like, well, it's not your traditional temple. This is literally a sci-fi temple. So it's all made up of, you know, very, very advanced modern technology that they used to actually make this religious area. Okay, remember the light source is coming from the top, so I'm going to use that as an indicator to pull any forms that I think are going to be overlapping. And any forms, obviously, like this is overlapping. The arms are overlapping as well, and the head. Luckily, there's already kind of a cast shadow being indicated there. Okay. Gonna continue to maybe make this darker so that it's all one consistent piece, and then just add on the details. And notice the distance that I'm at. I'm not going in any further because it's still considered a thumbnail, you know. So I definitely want to keep my distance, you know. This is definitely something for me to just kind of play with. And just kind of see the overall forms come together. I'm going to add in the light here. And this light is going to indicate just the overall direction of this plane right here. This top surface is definitely facing up. It's probably leaning, you know, towards camera a little bit, but I'm definitely saying that there's quite a bit of light source peeking through here, or quite a bit of top of that source right here peeking through. And I'm always going back and forth, and I'm painting and erasing out. You'll notice that I'm kind of doing a little bit of both here. And the reason why I'm erasing out is so I can add a little bit more complexity to the silhouette. I'm going to use my smudge brush here. You can use a smudge or you can paint directly on it. But I like using the smudge here. And you guys should have my brush presets here. Where in the smudge, I can basically toggle and move the existing texture. So if there's this little bit here, I can move this around and literally let this be kind of a piece right there, you know. But I'm gonna keep that part simple, and I'm most likely kind of try to move it around this way, just so I can simplify some of these areas. And the reason why I'm simplifying it is so that, you know, I don't have too many broken up areas, since it's getting relatively even. I want to have a nice arrangement of even internal shapes, internal proportions. Just thinking about a protrusion here, something that I can allow for this to be maybe some sort of like this section of the wall like pokes out or something. And guys, like when you guys are working with photos, if you can, always try to make sure to alter the photo or paint over the photo, just so that one, you're not a slave of the photo, and two, it's altering it enough so that it's not just literally just slap and calling it a day. I mean, this design, I know a lot of techniques these days. It's all about just photo slapping and trying to just make a cool image, but you want to try to make sure you can actually have a lot of fun and control over it. That's the biggest thing. I mean, I'm not against using photos. I mean, I use it in my process all the time, but I see it used in ways where it's not really benefiting the image, and it's not benefiting the user, because you know, they're not giving it a chance to really kind of get the most out of it, you know. So I mean, even like you know, witnessing and seeing how we're combining these two elements to make this work it's so weird. I mean, it's actually kind of cool. I'm creating a lot of interesting results from it that I probably normally wouldn't have been able to get if I were to just kind of combine just two photos together, or if I were to just combine or just find a photo together and just like, you know, not do anything creative with it. So when in doubt, if you guys are photo dropping or doing things using a photograph, try to make sure you can get creative with it and do something interesting. That's all I'm saying. So here I'm definitely thinking about, I'm just thinking about graphic design and just similar patterns and shapes that I'm trying to, you know, mimic over, because there's a lot of areas that are kind of simple, you know, but I just want to have enough to kind of go off of. And if there's some areas that you like say for example, I don't know, like, oh, I like this area, this is really cool, I want to use it down here, then I have the ability to just copy it over and just sample it and use it, since it's already in my design. And we can really take full advantage of that. Okay, so we got our Techno Buddha going, right? We're almost at a pretty good point on this one. Now I'm just going around, and I thought I cleaned the edges for this one, but for this one here, the silhouette is just a little bit, it needs just a little bit more. So I'm going around and just kind of cleaning up the shapes here. And by cleaning up the shapes, it allows me to really have more of a refined and controlled image, right? Especially in these areas that it's perceived as details. So it's going to give us the ability to to kind of look at it a little bit more precisely. Little indication of windows and stuff like that. Always nice and helpful. Looking at this, put in the ground plane. Right, so let's look at these two that we got going on. I save these out, and I pull these side by side, and we have two interesting looking architecture, right? I mean, it's fairly interesting enough for us to, you know, kind of go off of to start designing or think about some interesting designs. And I'm just gonna go ahead and darken my background here. The reason why I darken the background is so that I can look at my values here and pop more highlights, and just to see if there's any areas that are unclear. And right now I have this bit of texture that's really causing a lot of noise that I can use simplifying, so definitely going to simplify this just a little bit. Actually, a lot of it. It's really not doing much for me. It's just creating like weird noise here. And get in just a little bit more texture and kind of clean up these areas. Maybe there's like some sort of like interesting looking architectural ornament looking structure up here. Kind of look like antlers or something, but okay. All right. So I'm pretty sure you guys are like, oh my god, so nothing's happening, so boring. I know this part it's not the most exciting action, but I'm definitely figuring out a lot of just the nitty-gritty designs, even at these 2D illustrations, right, or these 2D design explorations. And the cool part is that, you know, at this point the question is, what do we do now, right? And that's where I would like us to go to the next segment of this chapter, which is we're going to take one of these designs and we're going to go ahead and actually try to figure out what this looks like in 3D space, meaning in perspective. Okay. All right, just a little bit more. Okay, cool. We got these two. I'm pretty happy with the general sketch direction. It's looking pretty good. You know, it's good for what it is and what where we need to take this for the next step. And just add a couple more highlights here. All right. think now we're ready to go to the next phase.